All right, so we're actually introducing a new segment to the show tonight, and that is the opinion segment. And this one might actually get us into a little trouble here.
Sir, if I may venture an opinion.
I'm not really interested in your opinion, 3PO.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
So yeah, I think we're gonna have fun with this. So ESPN, I was listening to their podcast, and trust me, this is not a hate ESPN segment, because I listen to them all the time. We'll continue to listen to them all the time. Watch game day every week, blah blah blah. But we've talked about David Pollock on this show in the past few weeks, and just kind of how he's made some controversial statements, and I've even kind of questioned, and I think all of us have, how much that he's kind of changed over the past few years in terms of how he's controversial in his statements, and just kind of, I think, Matt, you said he was a little bit of a tool bag.
Say it.
Like,
thank you.
He's a little bit of a tool bag. So
just a hair, just
yeah. So I was listening to the podcast today, and he admits, or at least that he was talking to their producer, and that their job is to get headlines and to get clicks. And so so he said that, and I was like, oh my gosh, we just talked about this, and that I wonder if they're doing all this on purpose to just try to get headlines. Well, I didn't even need to ask the question, because he said it, and they're just admitting it on this podcast. It's not like they're trying to hide it, right? So let me throw in one other thing here, and then we can kind of talk about both of these things. So next in the same show, within just a couple of minutes, Herb Street comes in and admits that he pulls for Michigan in the Big Ten. I mean, not them specifically, but they were talking about Michigan. He was like, yeah, I pull for Michigan in the Big Ten because it would be, quote unquote, good for college football and would help the sport for blue bloods to be doing well. And we've talked about branding and how everybody loves certain, schools, and based on logos and history and nostalgia and blah, blah, blah. Don't get me wrong. I love nostalgia. I think it's great. I think the history of the sport is cool. But I think once we start getting into stuff like that, I mean, that's kind of dangerous. And they're admitting on a show that they're more concerned about the ratings and people tuning in because they're watching Blue Bloods than they are about the sport itself and these teams. And in my own mind, I'm thinking, well, is that necessarily true? Because let's take a look. If you've got some teams that are lesser known teams, and they're finally working themselves into the national spotlight, are they not going to bring their fan base with them? Does that not help your ratings as well? Is it just the Blue Bloods that are going to help you out? I don't know, Jessi. I want to start with you, because you're rolling your eyes at what they're saying.
There's so many feelings. First, I'll start with
wait. I want a snack for this. All right, go ahead.
Those are yummy. But I mentioned last week how I didn't appreciate David Pollock's statements, and I thought they were just not founded in any facts. And I know half of what I say is not founded in facts. I don't have facts to hate Jimbo Fisher. I just do. But the thing is, as someone who worked in this industry, as someone who did reporting, who has a degree in this, I think you get yourself close to some trouble when you start doing this and admitting that your job is to get clicks and headlines. I get it. I mean, that's everyone's job, is to in that industry, is to do that. However, I think your job is also to, number one, it's to report fact. That is quite literally your job, is to report exactly what's happening, and be based in truth and well-researched facts. I think the other thing is, and this is something that people look to ESPN for, they look for your expert opinion. So if you don't truly believe that that's the case, why say it? Say something else. You can say, I think a headline saying Bama's still okay despite, Waddle being out, is still a headline that a Bama fan's going to read anyways, or other fans are going to read, because they're like, hold up, didn't they lose somebody? They're still going to click that. I just think you get into something that gets close to yellow journalism. And I think especially it's something where we see it in, news media. And if we start to see it in sports media, like, when can we trust our journalists? And so I think we also have this really cool opportunity when you hear stuff like that. And if it does make you feel a little weird, go look into it and see, make an opinion for yourself. And then we're in such a cool age where people have the technology and opportunity, just like we do, to create your own content. So I think places like ESPN should start to not get worried, but just check yourself a little bit, because people can make their own content. So if you start saying these things and you don't become, or you don't maintain yourself as a trusted outlet in sports, I just think it's a slippery slope. This is one instance and it's not a big deal. But it always starts with not a big deal, and then you start to go down. That's my first thing. I don't respect journalism like that. Now, David Pollack does not have a degree in journalism. David Pollack and a lot of the people on ESPN are former athletes, so their analysis is great. But I would remind them that there are very people that study journalism and broadcasting have should at least have been taught these ethics and kind of a code of conduct. So I would remind you that you may have a job to get headlines and clicks, but your job is also to report fact and report your opinion that you truly believe in. Second, Herb Street, you know exactly what I think, because I'm thinking not even just about Michigan. I'm thinking Notre Dame here. All right, you guys, I think I went on the record a lot talking trash about UCF. But now hearing Herb Street say this, I get why they had to make so much publicity on their own, because this is happening. I would be frustrated too if I was a smaller school and I was starting to make a little bit of a rumble and they were still like, you know what, this like really trashy Michigan team, put those guys on. Because no, just because they were good in the 1920s, yeah, the people that watched in the 1920s, they're not here anymore. They died. That's what I have to say. I'm done.
Now, you know who's not angry about the Pollock comments is Nick Saban, because I guarantee you that fired up his players. As soon as Pollock said they're done, oh man, if I'm him, I'm like printing that out and I'm putting it all over the locker room. Poison. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's, if anything, it's a motivator. So
and I don't have the issue as much from a Bama fan perspective. Like, that's annoying, but I think my issue just comes from like a journalism perspective. Sure. That's just not your job. Well, I mean, that shouldn't be your job.
The fact that he's even admitting, openly on the podcast that my job is to get headlines and clicks, and I think to your point,
are you the Daily Mail?
Well, to your point, talking about how there's so many people who can create content now. I mean, I think to a certain extent, ESPN is just like we were saying, they're just trying to get clicks because of all the competition. Like maybe if I can just create some controversial headline, people will click on me instead.
And they might. And even when I was working with the Big Ten as my client, yes, I did that.
I'm so
only
sorry.
non-Big Ten grad
money.
to
blood money.
That's right.
But we ran their social media, and they told us, they're like, we don't report on the Big Ten conference social media. We don't necessarily report score updates and things like that, because people are going to go to ESPN for that. That's just naturally where people go. We're going to report, academic stories, off the field stories, things like that, like those feel good stories, because people are going to look more to us for that than they are for scores. So ESPN, like, people are putting you in a lane, and I guess you want to get those headlines and clicks, but I don't think, and I'm using outlandish very loosely, but I don't think like, those clickable clickbait headlines are the way to necessarily build your credibility to where people want to read your opinion.
Yeah. Matt, I know you have some thoughts on this, and obviously we've kind of talked about the wrestling world, and to me, it's almost like they're trying to create personas in this day, and it's almost like I don't know if Pollock's supposed to be the heel or what, but it's like they're creating this show. Is
that a wrestling person?
Yes. Yeah, it's the bad guy.
It's the bad guy.
Oh, so, gotcha.
Okay.
Get with the program here, Jessi.
I know Hulk Hogan.
I'll have to tell Nick Lamb at the Lamb Show to tune into this one. You can catch that reference at least. But yeah, so, I mean, what are your thoughts? I'm sure you got some on this.
Well, I can tell you right now, the fact I looked it up. David Pollack has a degree in history, so there's that. Two, the fact that Jessi brought up the term yellow journalism, which is old, makes the cockles of my heart warm. Thirdly, yeah. Thirdly, I think she's spot on. I think this is a problem that we see across all media, whether that's sports, news, whether that's fashion, whether that's anywhere.
Kardashian.
It's no God, please don't bring them up. Trying to keep my blood pressure down tonight. If you start talking about the Kardashians, it's going to go up. It's one of those situations where you're getting rid of your credibility, but when you're saying that your entire purpose is to just generate traffic. Could you imagine Walter Cronkite coming out and saying, "Oh, I'm just reporting the news just for clicks"? Like that's such an obscene thought. I'm trying to think of the concept of somebody like that doing such a base thing, trying to get that across of I'm just trying to get clicks. I don't know. And I think you're right, Wes. I think he was playing up the heel persona a little bit, and I think that's what they do. Gary Danielson does it every week on CBS at 3:30 because he loves playing the heel.
Right.
Jackass. Anyway, sorry.
The word.
But understand that's and I understand from a business perspective. Okay, you get traffic, you want to make some noise, you want people going to your stuff because advertisers are going to want to see that. But at the same time, you almost have a duty to make sure that you're not trying to spin stuff. And this is a problem we've had for a long time in the media, top to bottom. And how do you get rid of it? I don't know how you get rid of it. All I know is what it looks like. If it looks like a dog, it barks like a dog. By God, it's a dog. Well, sure enough, this looks and smells like bad journalism, and that's what it is. And Herbie going into, and I won't begrudge Herbie. I've always liked Herb Street, but Herbie getting into it and saying that and maybe he didn't mean it like we took it, but when you say it's good for the sport when the blue bloods are on top, it's cyclical. We've talked about that. We've said, you can only have so many people at the top for so long before somebody else is going to have to come along and start to be at the top of the food chain. It's just that concept just doesn't make sense to me. It's like, okay, you want Michigan to be good, that's fine. But you don't need to do it at the expense of every other team in the Big Ten. And you don't need to do it at the expense of other conferences as well. And I say that when we have a podcast about one of the most successful conferences in the nation, but still it's just irresponsible, I think. And it's sports. It's really in the grand scheme of things not that important, but they do have a duty to call stuff down the middle. And they do have a duty to not have an agenda when they're, doing their programming and all that.
Right. And I'm like you, I really don't have a problem with Herb Street. If anything, he's kind of come to the defense of Georgia a lot of times. So, and just personally listening to him, I haven't really had an issue. But this one in particular, this specific one rubbed me the wrong way. When you start talking about stuff like that, where it's good for the sport, I mean, you have to, recognize at some point that the blue bloods, there's going to be new ones. You're not going to have the same ones from here till forever, right? At some point, it makes sense. It's logical that someone else is going to rise to the top, and we have to be okay with that.
People start watching then, because when the team, and I'm saying this as a Bama fan, people hate Bama. Mm-hmm. People from other conferences, people that don't have rivalries with them, people that don't even watch football hate Bama because they're tired of seeing them win. So when someone beats Bama, they're like, "Oh, I'm going to watch that team." They get excited because they get bored of something else, and I don't get bored, but that's what happens. People then start getting more engaged, I think, with the sport because it's not as, again, using this term very loosely, monotonous for them.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, that's what we're here for, is to keep ESPN accountable. So you're welcome. So